In the first video in this series, we spent $1,250 to buy the super rare Alfa Romeo 1750 Veloce Spider. The interior was completely destroyed, but we got it all cleaned up and put back together. In the second video, we took apart the engine. Looking for any damage that might have been caused by sitting for 44 years, we stripped down the engine to a short block, leaving the crank in place and the pistons in the bores. In part 3, this video, we put it all back together and see if it'll run. But before we do that, I have something I need to say. I have a confession to make. In the last video, when I said this, I'm going to leave it here for the teardown because I don't see any reason to go any further. I'm a little bit worried about some of the oil passageways being blocked, but I'm not that worried about the crank. I was completely and totally wrong. What happened was, getting ready for this video, I was cleaning up all the parts, and while I was cleaning, I noticed some rust in a bore that I had missed earlier. And it was enough rust to motivate me to take the piston out, clean up the bore, give it a light hone, put it back in, address the problem, but move on. But when I took the piston out, I had to look at the bearings. And this is what they look like. As you can tell, those bearings are completely and totally ruined. And unfortunately, it didn't stop at just the connecting rod. I also had to look at the main bearings, and the main bearings were as well completely and totally ruined. And the damage had gone so far that it had worn down the crankshaft so unevenly that the journals had become cone-shaped. It was so bad that I had to bring the crankshaft to a machine shop, and I had to have them grind the crankshaft down to a second undersize, and I had to buy main bearings and connecting rod bearings that are second oversized. That took a month to get the crankshaft back, but I am very happy to finally say that it's back, and I have everything on hand that I think I need to put the engine back together. So without further ado, I am incredibly excited to get started on this project. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to rebuild the head. Let's get started. Alright, so here's our head. I've had the head skimmed by the machine shop. I have cleaned all the surfaces. I have 8 new valves. I already took the valve stem seals out, but before we put the valves in, we have to lap the valves to each seat. And then once we lap the valves, they will be permanently mated to the seat. That's what it looks like with lapping compound. Lapped, not lapped. That one is not lapped. That one is. So I'm just gonna go through all of them and get ready for the next step. Okay, all the valves have been lapped and numbered. Valve guide stem seals. So next step is to install the valves. So we're going to install number 1 on number 1. So we're going to use the same tool that we used to take them out to put them back in. Let's go. They are now both in there. It's hard to see the second one. There it is. I'm gonna rip through these one by one. The head is finished, valves are in. Alright, with the cylinder head done, now we can put the bearings in the block and get ready for the crankshaft. Crankshaft goes on. Cannot forget these. Now we can get the other bearings in. Let's get these bolted down and torqued. I have checked with Plastigauge all of the clearances and they all look good. So got these in. Now it's time to torque all these down. Let's get torqued to 36. Okay, crankshaft is in. It is spinning freely. I'm really happy with that. So the next step is flip it over and start putting the pistons in. Before I put the pistons in, here's a quick look at the hone I have. So putting the pistons back in here, I double checked all the tolerances on all the pistons and the rings and the bores, and they're all well within spec. Now with all the pistons in, we can go ahead and put in the connecting rod bearings. I'm going to start out with number 1 first. There we go. That one's on there. So I don't have the footage for some reason of putting the caps on the connecting rods, but here they are one by one. Alright, so let's torque these all down. Now we got to get this front sprocket on. Put a little bit of assembly lube on there. Okay, now we can get this front shroud on. I replaced the front main seal here, and I have a layer of sealant on both sides and a gasket. So hopefully this does the job. These, from what I've read, these have a little bit of a habit of leaking. But what I've also read is that everything in this car has a habit of leaking. Great. Now we can install the oil pump. I've put a new seal on. Oil pump is on. Okay, now we're ready to put the oil pan on. I've already put gasket maker on this. Now let's put the actual gasket on. All right. There we go. Tight, tight. All right, now is the oil filter housing. I already put some sealant on there. I can hear the birds chirping. Spring, where are you? I'm ready. Sensor with a new washer. Now we can go ahead with the water pump. Brand new water pump. Surprisingly expensive. Tachometer drive, new seal. Now the pulley goes on. All good. Okay, so the bottom end is all rebuilt and put back together. Now it's time to put the head on. So let's get started. That's very exciting. Very important not to forget about these little O-rings that go and seal the two together. Ow, that's fell on my fingers. Yay. So cylinder head nuts all get tightened down to 60 and they are tightened down with oil. So these get torqued down in a very particular sequence. 10. All right. Okay, now it is time to feed and retrieve the timing chain. Great, that worked perfectly. Okay, with the chain on, now we can put some assembly oil in place and we can get ready to put the cam on. The cam bearing cap nuts are on and they've all been oiled and now they all get torqued down to 16 foot-pounds. 16 . 16 foot-pounds. 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 So before we tighten everything down, we want to make sure that the cams and the crankshaft is all within the correct timing. Now we can put the timing chain together. I have a brand new quick link. Just like that. We loosen this bolt and it will tighten the timing chain. Just like that. Perfect. Okay, so I turned it over and it has retained the timing. Sweet. On to the next step. I'm gonna get this cover off and then I have a new rear main seal. Oop, that came off really easily. And now it's time to put the new rear main seal on. That one got away from me. Put the dipstick on. Now we can get the flywheel on. Bolts. Okay, so now we can get the intake manifold on. Now let's get these all tightened down. All right, so I have a new thermostat, a new thermostat O-ring, a new gasket. All right. Since we are going to go with carburetors, I have to use adapter plates, which are going to adapt this intake manifold to be able to use carburetors. Plates look like this, so I just have to use some gaskets and get them bolted on. So now we can get the alternator set up. This is a new belt. I have it. All right, that's easier, much easier. Nice. So the next step is to get the clutch and pressure plate on. So I've decided to go with the clutch that was on the car because it's in good condition and not worn out, and these are very expensive. So what I will have to do is use the pieces from the old transmission that I found in the trunk to help align the clutch as I'm assembling everything. So let's get right into it. Get this thing on here, just like that. So that will align it. Okay, so let's talk about the transmission for a minute before it goes back on the car. I have rebuilt the slave cylinder. I have a new throwout bearing. I have cleaned everything and inspected everything. I have put a new bushing in here and a new donut on the back. I have split the whole case apart, resealed it, and inspected the gears, and it is now ready to go back in the car. There we go. Nice. So the timing has been triple checked, and I have new shims for the valve lash clearances. So those are all relatively in spec. They will need to be reshimmed once the engine is broken in. So on to the next step. I'm gonna get the valve cover on, which means new valve cover gasket. I'm gonna start out with 2 new seals on the back. Now for the gasket. All right, on goes the valve cover. Valve cover nuts with new seals. Now we can get the starter motor on. Okay, jumping a little bit further forward, the engine is all ready to go back in the car. I put on that bypass hose. I put on the 2 engine mounts, this side and this side. I have fitted a new slave cylinder hose because I had to cut the old one. And I have filled the transmission with, let's see, 2 quarts of MTL transmission fluid. Okay, so in preparation for putting the engine back, the engine bay has gone through quite the transformation. I have cleaned the whole thing, degreased it, wire wheeled it, and then rust neutralized all the rust spots with a rust neutralizer, and then painted on top of the rust neutralizer where I needed to. I have rebuilt the throttle assembly there with new bushings here and here. I have also stripped that down, rust neutralized it, and painted it. So now we're ready to put the engine in. Very excited. The engine is officially in. We got that motor mount all connected. Got the other one on that side, hopefully you can see it. It's over there. And here is the bottom mount for the transmission. Okay, with the engine in the car, now we can put the oil filter on. I've got a brand new oil filter. Okay, now that the engine is in, we can see if it will leak any oil. We're gonna put in 7.8 quarts, according to the manual, and we're gonna do this high zinc classic car formula. All right, that should be just 7.8. All right, let's get these headers on. These have been painted with high temperature header paint. 4 new exhaust gaskets. So I have installed some fuel line and a fuel pressure regulator, which was recommended for the carburetor changeover from the Spica system. I forgot to mention this, but when I connected the fuel lines, I also connected the engine to the wiring harness and connected a new throttle cable. I have plumbed some new fuel lines, and I have made an absolutely ridiculous but very necessary fuel linkage here. So let's get the carburetors on. All right. The carbs have been all connected, and the fuel lines have also been connected to the carbs. Now let's get some spark plugs in the car. These get torqued to 25 foot-pound. Now we can get our timing system installed. This is an electronic distributor made by RML. Okay. Now, time for the radiator. Okay, the radiator is all in. We have new hoses, top and bottom. I'm using a bypass hose for the heater right now because I'm not sure that the heater is up to par. We have a new cap. Shroud is on with the fan. So I have a full brand new exhaust here. And before we try to fire it up, I'm going to put at least these 2 front pieces on so that the engine is quiet enough that we can hear any trouble. The new exhaust is all connected. Okay, so this is a big moment. We are finally ready to see if it will start. Everything is hooked up and ready to go. I want to see first if it has oil pressure, and then if it has oil pressure, I'm going to plumb up a fuel tank to the fuel line and a new fuel pump that I have installed. So let's see what happens. Okay, so I hooked up a oil pressure gauge to the oil filter housing just to be double sure, and I turned it over and we have oil pressure, so that's very exciting. Okay, so we have brand new battery, we have the engine static timed with the ignition, we have oil pressure, and we have fuel pressure. Let's try to start it. All right. Got fuel pressure, 2 pumps. That's close. It's close. Oh, we almost got it. It's running! It's running! It sounds good! Wow! It's running! Good job. Alright, it's running. That's very exciting. Before I go any further, I just want to talk to you about how you can help build this car. On my Patreon, I've set up a series of polls that you can vote on, and you yourself can make a difference in how this car turns out. There are small things like the blinkers, whether we're going to do American style blinkers or European style blinkers, the smaller ones. And then there's also much bigger polls that have a much bigger effect. Like you can vote on the color of the car. We all might want to change it to red, the classic Alfa Romeo, or we might want to keep the original China white paint code that it is. On top of that, there's also extra content on there, like restoration of these very rare 72 spec Euro bumpers. So go have a look, because you can change how this car is going to come out. And if you want it to come out well, you can make a difference. The link to the Patreon is in the description of this video. Go have a look, and thank you. So that's the end of part 3. Very exciting. It's running. I'm going to put in a lot more work to do the small little bits and pieces, like I'm going to have to rejet the carbs. I have a fuel tank. Right now it's plumbed up to just a small 2-gallon fuel tank. In the next episode, this is what we'll be doing. We will be tackling all the running gear, everything that powers the car, from the drive shaft to the sway bars, everything. So stick around for the next episode, and if you like this content, please subscribe and go have a look at the Patreon, because for a little bit amount of money every month, you can have a say in how this car turns out, and you get to support not only this project, but projects in the future, and you can have a say in them and help me build them the exact way you want. So thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.